Funding for this video is brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you.
With over 1,000 monsters to choose from in D&D, it can be hard to know which ones to use, and even harder to know how to play them. What weapons do they favor? What tactics would they use? How do they interact with other types of monsters? These are all questions that can come up to DMs that are looking to make their combats more enticing for their players. It's certainly one that I struggled with. That's why I'm back today with another monster breakdown for D&D. Hello again everyone, I'm Bill from Altroll, and today I'm going to dive into a brief history of a D&D creature, how that history was adapted into 5th edition, and how this lore can help game masters make their combat encounters better. So, whether you're here for the cool lore breakdown or for the combat tactics, I'm hoping to give you a lot more to chew on when it comes to the monsters we face in D&D. For episode 22, let's trot on over to discuss a classic mythological creature, the Centaur. A centaur is a creature from Greek mythology with the upper body of a human and the lower body and legs of a horse. The most common theory of how they came to be was from ancient non-riding cultures' first sighting of nomads on horses. To ancient societies who may have never seen someone ride a horse before, it's presumed that a rider would have looked like a half-man, half-animal, thus birthing the myth of the centaur. Said to live in the mountains of Thessaly, the centaur's mythological depiction likened them to untamed horses, with their wild nature being symbolic of humanity's barbarism. The most famous myth reflecting this dichotomy was their fight with Lapith, when the centaurs attempted to carry off Hippodamia and the other women on the day of her marriage to Pirithous, the king of Lapithae. Theseus, the divine founder of Athens, happened to be present, and assisted Pirithous in driving off the centaurs. This battle would be famously portrayed in the metopes of the Parthenon, as well as in the Battle of the Centaurs, a relief made by Michelangelo in 1492. Since then, centaurs have remained present in literature and media across the world, popping up in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series, the Might and Magic series, Warhammer Fantasy, and Dungeons & Dragons. First appearing in the original Dungeons & Dragons set in 1974, centaurs were described as neutral or good woodland beings who shun the company of men. Dwelling in remote pastures and secluded glades, they would make their homes deep within the forest, utilizing nature's bounty to sustain themselves through hunting and foraging. While they mostly spoke their own language, it was stated that around 10% of them could speak Elven, which they would use to negotiate and trade with Elven clans who lived near their lair. Centaur society was organized into tribes, with anywhere from 3 to 20 families living in one place. They survived through a mixture of hunting, foraging, fishing, agriculture, and trade. Male centaurs took on the role of hunters and protectors of the tribe, but everyone contributed to the education of their young. Each tribe would have a handful of leaders, but one leader would be a priest, who had the spellcasting abilities of a level 3 druid. This priest would help the tribe balance their relationship with nature, as centaurs took great care to hunt, fish, and chop down trees with nature's harmony in mind. The centaur continued to appear as a monster in later editions of D&D, being featured in 2nd edition's Monstrous Compendium Volume 1 in 1989. What was really interesting was that the centaur also became a playable race in 2nd edition's The Complete Book of Humanoids, released in 1993. They were later presented as a playable race again in the supplemental sourcebook, Player's Option, Skills and Powers in 1995. Their appearances as a monster and playable race would become a staple in the game, being featured in 3rd edition's Monster Manual in 2000 and 4th edition's Monster Manual 2 in 2009. Their lore and abilities changed very little, however, barring their brief stint as a Fey creature in 4th edition, and they were reverted back to a monstrosity in 2014 with the release of 5th edition. In 5th edition, the Centaur is described as having the body of a great horse topped by a humanoid torso, head, and arms. Reclusive wanderers and omen readers of the wilds, Centaurs prefer to avoid conflict and company, keeping far from villages and cities where other races make their homes. Living as hunter-gatherers, Centaur tribes migrate across warmer climates, their travels spanning entire continents in some cases. This means that a single tribe may not cross the same path for generations, which, unfortunately, leads to conflict with unaware settlers who decide to build a village in the middle of a Centaur tribe's sacred route. During these migration periods, Centaurs who can't keep pace with the rest of the pack, such as the old or sick, are left behind by the tribe. While some choose to disappear into the wilderness, those that can stomach the loss of their tribe may take up residence with other races, providing their knowledge of nature and the frontier in exchange for food and shelter. Despite their isolationist nature, Centaurs will trade with nearby elves and caravans of humanoids who don't appear hostile. Those who choose to be hostile, however, will find that the Centaur is a fierce opponent in battle. Now that we've examined their lore, let's pivot over to the Centaur's stat block to take a look at how they work mechanically. Starting at the top, we have their size, creature type, and alignment. Size in 5th edition defines the space a creature takes up in combat, with a large creature taking up a 10-foot by 10-foot square or hex on a battle map. Using the 3.5 edition Dungeon Master's Guide, shown here, Centaurs can be between 8 and 16 feet tall and weigh between 500 pounds and 2 tons. Their creature type is Monstrosity. Monstrosities are monsters in the strictest sense and serve as a catch-all category for creatures that don't fit into any other category. Alignment broadly describes a creature's general outlook on the world and combines their moral beliefs with their attitudes toward society and order. The alignment of the Centaur is neutral good, meaning they do the best they can to help others according to their needs. Below that top bar are the rest of the Centaur's stats, which are essential for the Dungeon Master to play them in combat. The Centaur has an armor class of 12, 6d10 plus 12 hit points, or 45 on average, and a movement speed of 50 feet. Looking at their ability scores, they have 18 strength, 14 dexterity, 14 constitution, 9 intelligence, 13 wisdom, and 11 charisma. With 10 being average for ability scores, the Centaur has high strength, dexterity, constitution, and wisdom, average charisma, and low intelligence. For their skills and proficiencies, the Centaur has a +6 to athletics, a +3 to perception, a +3 to survival, a passive perception of 13, speaks Elven and Sylvan, has a proficiency bonus of +2, has a challenge rating of 2, and awards 450 experience points when killed. In terms of special abilities, the Centaur has the Charge ability, which states that if the Centaur moves at least 30 feet straight towards a target and then hits it with a pike attack on the same turn, the target takes an extra 3d6 piercing damage. In terms of offensive actions, the Centaur has a pike attack, a hooves attack, a longbow attack, and the multi-attack feature, which allows it to make either one pike and one hooves attack, or 2 longbow attacks per attack action. The pike attack has a +6 to hit, a reach of 10 feet, and deals 1d10 +4 piercing damage on a hit. The hooves attack has a +6 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, and deals 2d6 plus 4 bludgeoning damage on a hit. The longbow attack has a +4 to hit, a range of 150 feet normally and 600 feet with disadvantage, and deals 1d8 plus 2 piercing damage on a hit. Lastly, we have their environment tags. When using digital resources, we can see that centaurs are found in forest and grassland areas. Now that we've gone through and sorted out their stat block, we can begin to relate the centaur's lore and abilities to how we should be using them in combat encounters. Specifically, we're going to look at how they behave, how they would approach a combat situation, and how to get into the mind of a centaur if you want to fight effectively as one. How do we do this? Well, we'll need to take the lore and stat block of the centaur and compare that with how that information is intended, referencing Tactics and Interpretations from The Monsters Know What They're Doing by Keith Amon. Let's start by going through Amon's key assumptions one by one, and relating them to the centaur as we go. The first of Amon's assumptions is that most creatures want to survive, and if seriously wounded, will try to flee combat. Exceptions to this rule are fanatics or intelligent beings who believe they'll be hunted down and killed if they do flee. Seriously wounded can be subjective, but we can assume that threshold to roughly be 1/3 of the creature's health. With an average of 45 hit points, 1/3 of that would be 15. Given their natural conflict avoidance, a centaur will only fight if it has to, meaning there will likely be little to no options to flee if it is fighting. As such, a centaur is very likely to fight to the bitter end, but if reduced to 15 hit points or fewer, it will try to look for an avenue for escape with its high movement speed. Next up, let's look at how their alignment can impact their thinking. On the scale of good to evil, good creatures tend to be friendly to others, whereas evil creatures are hostile to others. On the scale of lawful to chaotic, lawful monsters may try to capture or non-lethally subdue others, whereas chaotic monsters may kill them. Since centaurs are neutral good, we know two things about them. First, since they're between lawful and chaotic, they have an equal chance of capturing or killing their opponent, though their good nature means they may lean towards capture when given a choice. Second, since they are good creatures, centaurs will be friendly to others who do not threaten them, though they will still keep to themselves whenever possible. Continuing with their mindset, let's dive into some of their mental ability scores. Centaurs have an intelligence score of 9. With regards to creatures that have an intelligence score of 8 to 11, Amon states, "A creature with intelligence of 8 to 11 is unsophisticated in its tactics and largely lacking in strategy, but it can tell when things are going wrong and adjust to some degree." Simply put, a centaur is no tactician, relying on their sheer power and speed to charge their way to victory. Should that not work, they may swap to their ranged attacks instead, but any tactical change past that is going to be beyond them. Centaurs also have a wisdom score of 13. With regards to creatures that have a wisdom score of 12 or 13, Amon states, "A creature with wisdom of 12 or higher will choose targets carefully, and may even refrain from combat in favor of parley if it recognizes that it's outmatched." As stated earlier, centaurs are not going to be outwardly hostile to those who are not hostile to them, choosing to speak or negotiate where possible. When pressed into a fight, however, they will be able to prioritize certain targets over others, such as casters or ranged combatants that can't outrun their devastating charge attack. Now that we've set up how they think, let's look at the centaur's physical abilities that influence how they fight. Thinking like Amon, we can assume the following. Creatures with high strength focus on melee combat, and won't need to compensate with greater numbers. As such, they won't need to outnumber an enemy to be willing to take a fight. Creatures with high dexterity will prefer to attack with ranged weapons, and if it's intelligent, the creature may lay traps as well. Creatures with high constitution typically have a hit point advantage over their enemies, and because of that, they're less likely to hide in combat since they can soak up a couple attacks before going down. A creature with a feature that gives it advantage or gives its enemy disadvantage will always prefer to use that feature. To recap our earlier stat block examination, Centaurs have high strength, dexterity, and constitution. However, their strength is the highest of their physical ability scores. On top of that, they have an extremely high movement speed of 50 feet, and their charge ability only procs on their pike attack. Comparing that examination to the assumptions we put forward, we can safely presume that Centaurs use their mobility to maneuver around the battlefield, charging at specific targets with their pike. When possible, they will try to proc their charge ability for an extra 3d6 piercing damage, but should enemies be out of melee reach, they can just as easily swap to their longbows and loose a volley. The last major premise from Amon is that in D&D 5th edition, unless otherwise specified, any creature gets their full movement, 1 action, 1 bonus action, and 1 reaction, just like any player character does. Amon posits that any creature that exists within the game world will have evolved in accordance with this rule, and it will seek to obtain the best possible result from the action economy of the game. This means they will combine whatever movement, actions, bonus actions, and reactions are available to them for the best possible outcome. In terms of their action economy, the Centaur has quite a bit of flexibility in how to maximize their effectiveness per turn. As stated before, their charge ability grants an insane amount of extra damage, and they can proc their melee multi-attack on top of that to do a hoof attack on the same turn as well. That being said, they also get 2 longbow attacks with their multi-attack feature, meaning that while they do slightly less damage at range, they aren't losing out on the number of attacks they make when using ranged weapons. A pack of Centaurs may mix these two fighting styles, with frontline Centaurs charging in and out of combat with pikes and hooves, while archers fire away at spellcasters or flying enemies. So, with all of these assumptions laid out and applied to Centaurs, what do we now know about how to use them in combat? First, Centaurs are tribal nomads who avoid the company of other races while they roam across the grasslands. Their great migrations take them far and wide, gaining them a wide array of knowledge that they share with other races when they get too old or sick to carry on with the herd. Second, unlike many of the other creatures we've examined, Centaurs are aligned as good, meaning they will not be outwardly hostile unless given a reason to be. That shouldn't be mistaken for friendliness, however, as they are still very reclusive with outsiders and deadly against those who attack them first. Third, in combat, Centaurs will prefer to charge their enemies down with their pikes, utilizing their high movement speed and multi-attack to get a ton of damage in, then move away to line up another charge on their next turn. While this is their main tactic, Centaurs are also well trained with the bow, and will utilize longbows to strike at enemies that can't be reached with their pikes. Fourth, if reduced to 15 hit points or fewer, a Centaur will attempt to flee combat. Their lore creates an interesting scenario where a Centaur who's losing a combat encounter may be abandoned by their fellow tribesmen, following their principle that those who can't keep pace are left behind, though whether or not that happens is largely up to the DM. Fifth, if a Centaur wins a combat encounter, they're likely to non-lethally subdue or capture their defeated foes. While carrying prisoners would only slow down their migration patterns, they may interrogate defeated enemies to find out why they attacked, or even drop them off at a nearby settlement to let the other races deal with them. With that, we come to the end of today's video on the Centaur. Stoic nomads who roam the plains of many a D&D world, there's nothing phony about these ponies. As good creatures, they don't represent an overt threat to the average adventuring party, but can still pop up in conflicts where unbridled nature meets frontier settlements. One thing that I'd like to know is, what do you think of the Centaur? Do you like these majestic mares as neutral encounters for your party? Or do you think they're just overrated warhorses that can hold a weapon? You can let me know down in the comments, or you can discuss it on the Alt-Roll Discord using the link in the description. If you want to support Alt-Roll, you can visit our Ko-fi link in the description to leave a one-time or recurring donation. And make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified when our videos go live. However, that's all I had for you. Thank you all for watching, make sure to have a great rest of your day, and I'll see all of you next time.